17 years ago this week, on March 13, 2004, the WWE Hall of Fame was revived for the first time since 1996 with an induction ceremony held at the Hilton Hotel in New York City. The class of '04 included Jesse the Body Ventura, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Superstar Billy Graham, Don Morocco, Tito Santana, Big John Studd, Sergeant Slaughter, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Harley Race, and the Junkyard Dog, with Pete Rose rounding out the crew as the celebrity inductee into what was now being called the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame. And with the success of the DVD, because they put the whole ceremony on DVD, it did so well that they decided to make the Hall of Fame an annual part of WrestleMania weekend going forward, and to bring the event into actual arenas, which I think was a mistake. And I think it should revert back to banquet halls with very limited fans or no fans at all, like they had for this event. Bobby Heenan's induction speech is still, in my opinion, the greatest Hall of Fame speech ever given in company history. My eyes never fail to well up a little bit at the very end of that speech when he says, you know, the one thing that's missing, I wish Monsoon was here. He wishes Gorilla Monsoon was there with him at that ceremony. Boy, he and everybody else, those two were gold together. It brings a smile to my face when I see them on the old shows and I hear their commentary, but it also makes me very sad when I realize that, you know, in today's age, and I don't know how old would Gorilla Monsoon even be today, but, you know, even if you go back a few years, even in their older age, in the age of podcasts and all this stuff that, you know, WWE does on their website and stuff, imagine the gold that we still could have gotten potentially if they were, you know, healthy enough from Monsoon and Heenan if they were alive. You know, Monsoon died in '99 from cancer. But then you've got Bobby Heenan, even just Heenan alone. Can you imagine a Bobby Heenan podcast? Or Bobby Heenan on social media? That's why people went crazy years ago when they thought it was really him on Twitter and it turned out to be an imposter and his wife had to, you know, get that shut down. But Bobby got sick, and of all things to get sick with, he got sick with throat cancer. And to me, that was always the cruelest twist of fate. You have a guy who made money. He made his money. He made a living with his mouth, with his voice, as a manager, as a mouthpiece, as an announcer. And of all the things to be afflicted with, it took away his voice. It took away his speech. It took away his ability to speak and to communicate. And there could be no crueler fate than that for somebody who based their entire career around talking. And every time I think about that, it makes me very sad. But this Hall of Fame speech, even with the speech problems he was having, because he had already gone through a first bout with throat cancer by this point, so, you know, certain parts it was a little hard to understand what he was saying, but still, to this day, the best Hall of Fame speech that I have ever seen at any WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. The very next day, on March 14th, WWE hosted what may end up going down as the last ever WrestleMania to be held inside Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania 20. Remember the tagline? Where it all begins again. Given that now we have cities lined up bidding for WrestleMania, bidding on these big stadium shows where they can get 60 and 80 and 100,000 people into the buildings, it is very possible we will never again see WrestleMania inside the Garden, although, you know, forever is a long time. They could always do WrestleMania in the Garden and just jack up ticket prices. That's always a possibility. But the show is remembered mostly for the closing shot of Chris Benoit, fresh off winning the World Heavyweight title from Triple H and Shawn Michaels in a triple threat match, celebrating in the ring and embracing his best friend, WWE Champion Eddie Guerrero, both men with title belts, not the biggest, not the most popular. They were never the megastars like an Austin or a Hogan or a Rock or anybody on that level, but they were two of the best at their craft. And there were a lot of people who probably never envisioned them standing there together at the end of a WrestleMania as champion. It was a very emotional moment for both of them, and the confetti is falling from the ceiling. Now, of course, it's one of the most bittersweet moments in company history. It's actually really depressing to see that moment. I know some people will still look at that and it makes them happy, But just knowing how things turned out for both of them, I can't not watch that and just be fucking depressed when I see that. But The Undertaker made his return as a hybrid of the Dead Man and the Big Evil character, with Paul Bearer returning to be his manager in a win over Kane. It was also the final match in their respective runs, their first runs in the company, for Bill Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. Bill Goldberg was working on a one-year deal. That one-year deal was coming up, and he was not interested in renewing. And originally, the idea was that Brock would go in there. I think Vince had promised Brock, you're going to go in there and you're going to beat Goldberg in about 30 seconds. That was until Brock Lesnar made the decision that I don't want to be here anymore either. And he had told Vince McMahon at the beginning of the month about his decision to leave, and I think shortly after that he told the locker room about his decision to leave. And, you know, and there was a lot of ill feelings towards Brock because the company had built everything around this guy, around this young kid. They brought him in, they gave him the big push, they put the title on him. They put him over all of the top guys, from Big Show to Undertaker, The Rock, everybody. They wanted to put him over Stone Cold on Raw in a King of the Ring qualifier. And Stone Cold said, fuck you, and he went home. Although he had other reasons for doing that. But the point is, they invested so much in this guy, and they put him over everybody to make him look like a monster. And now he wanted to just pick up and leave. So you can kind of, I mean, look, and that's his call. Can't begrudge the guy for that, but you can also understand why there would have been some animosity towards him in the company. Look at this. He's bailing on us. This guy got the biggest push of his life, and now he's walking away. Well, the fans in the building that night, you are in New York. You do have a lot of smart fans in the audience, and they knew what was up. They knew that both these guys were headed for the exit door, and boy, did they make them know about it. They booed these fuckers out of this building. The most popular person in the match was the referee. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the enforcer. He was the special referee for the match. He got the best reaction out of anybody. But everybody knew that Goldberg was on his way out, and they knew that Lesnar was on his way out too, and they booed them into oblivion. The Rock tagged with Mick Foley against Evolution in a handicap match, and it would be nearly 8 years before The Rock wrestled another match, and it would, funny enough, be right back in that same building, Madison Square Garden in 2011, for a tag match with John Cena against The Miz and R-Truth. Trish Stratus turned heel on Chris Jericho and aligned with Christian, and John Cena opened the show in his first of many WrestleMania matches, beating the Big Show to win the United States Championship. 10 years ago this week, on March 13th, 2011, TNA has played home to its fair share of embarrassing moments and embarrassing situations over the years. Many or all of which have been well documented over the years on this podcast over the last decade plus. But maybe none were worse than what we saw at their Victory Road pay-per-view here in 2011. With Jeff Hardy in no condition to perform. He wasn't even in any condition to stand up straight, let alone get in the ring and wrestle. Sting pinned him in the main event in just 88 seconds in the main event of this show to retain the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. It took Jeff 45 seconds after his music initially started playing to even walk out through the curtain. He was clearly under the influence of something, or everything. Referee Brian Hebner could see that something was wrong. He threw up the dreaded X signal before the match even started. When does that happen? That the referee throws up the dreaded X and the match hasn't even begun yet. That brought out Eric Bischoff. I'm not even sure what his role was at this point in the company. But he worked there. He came in with Hogan. He was in some position of authority behind the scenes, even though he might claim otherwise, that he had no power. But here comes Eric Bischoff down to the ring, who communicated something to Hardy. Then he walked over to Sting, and he clearly was trying to communicate something to Sting, all while cutting a promo on the fly. He's trying to communicate to these guys, basically, we need to go home here. His orders were very clear. Take it home quickly. And Sting did. He dropped Jeff down with the Scorpion Death Drop, held his legs down for the pin as Jeff tried to kick out. Sting looked like a disappointed dad in there when this thing was over. The fans were chanting bullshit. Sting turned to somebody in the crowd who chanted that and said, "I agree." Now, 4 years ago at a Q&A at the Wales Comic-Con, Sting made an appearance. He was asked about that match at Victory Road. He had this to say: "Jeff was in a bad way. He was deteriorating as the day went on. By the time our match rolled around, it became clear that he could not compete, and so I had to take him down quickly. He has since turned it all around. I love Jeff. I love his work. I hold nothing against him, and I wish him all the best." Eric Bischoff, on his 83 Weeks podcast, had this to say about the situation. He got into some details here about what happened. This is from his point of view. And hat tip to Wrestling Inc. for the transcription on this. Jeff's MO at the time was to get to Universal Studios, check in, and go hide until it was absolutely necessary to come out, and it was either interview time or match time. To this day, I don't know where he hid. He would show up, he would wave, and he would hide until 6 o'clock. I think on this night, it's safe to assume he was hiding wherever he was hiding and doing whatever drugs he brought with him. I'm no expert on drugs, but I have seen enough of it from a distance and up close to recognize it. The agent looked at me like, "What the fuck are we going to do?" It took forever to find Jeff. He was really late getting to Gorilla. Knowing and hearing that they were having a difficult time finding him, I made my way over to Gorilla. When I saw Jeff approaching, I didn't notice Jeff being twisted up as much as I did the agent's face. Once I got close to Jeff, it was obvious he was fucked up. Whoever the agent was essentially said he's too fucked up to work. Then it became, who's calling this? It wasn't my job. I was the executive producer of the television show. I technically had no authority whatsoever, and no official role in the pay-per-view unless I was a talent or was asked to input on creative. I was just kind of standing there waiting for someone to make a decision, and no decisions are being made, and now Jeff is making his way down to the ring. There was no captain of the ship in Gorilla. It was my exchange with Dixie that was the catalyst for me to say, fuck it, nobody else is going to do anything. The bell is going to ring, and it can't go down like this. I don't want to make this sound like I'm putting myself over or I cared so much about Sting. I was concerned about the show. I didn't want Sting to go out there and try to have a match with a guy who was completely fucking wasted. I wasn't worried about Sting getting hurt, but the match would have been the shits, and I didn't want Sting to be in that position. Sting had no idea that Jeff was going to show up fucked up. I'm looking for a decision. I'm looking for somebody to come up with an idea. We don't have a lot of time, folks. Can't call a meeting. Somebody has to call the ball. Who's going to call it? Fuck it. I literally walked through the curtain not knowing what I was going to do. There were two things that crossed my mind. My first thought was for me and my heel character to go out and knock him out. Just drop him and then have the referee call the match and the disqualification. By the time I walked through the curtain, got halfway down to the ring, I realized that wouldn't work because there was a no DQ stip. So I started improvising a story and laying out a promo. What I was trying to do was buy time to figure out how to communicate to Jeff, the referee, and to Sting. Now I got to rewrite the show while I'm in the ring and the show is happening and one of the people in the match is completely disabled and unable to continue. So I did what I did. I basically told Jeff, take his finish. We're going to shorten this up. Take the fucking finish. I went to Sting. Now that's where I had to get more creative because I was trying to talk to Sting while at the same time I'm trying to cut a promo and hide all of this from the viewing audience and make it look like it's part of the show. I basically told Sting, hit him with your finish, get him the fuck out of here, let's go home. Sting was able to communicate with the referee, so that was it. The overwhelming fog that settled in backstage was disappointing for Sting. It was a horrible position for him to be in at that stage of his career. At his level of stardom, to subject someone like Sting to a situation like that was embarrassing and undeserved. I think it reflected a tremendous amount of lack of professionalism within the entire TNA organization from top to bottom, and I think people were genuinely sad for Jeff. It was disappointing for Sting and sadness for Jeff. That was the overwhelming sense. Nobody was second-guessing anything or blaming anybody or pointing any fingers. It was really just sad more than anything. I'll tell you what was sad. What was sad is that it even got to the point where nobody had the balls to step in and stop him from going out to the ring. I love how Bischoff himself says that the agent, he doesn't name who it was, but the agent said, literally said, he's too fucked up to go out to the ring. Nobody stopped him. Nobody grabbed his arm and said, hey, Jeff, come here for a second. Nobody tackled him. Nobody can call an audible here. Nobody can say, hey, Jeff, come back here for a second. And let's just, you know, we'll have Sting in the ring and let's communicate down to the referee and down to Sting what's going on. Tell them to stall for a little bit. Maybe Sting issues an open challenge. We'll try to wrangle somebody up back here in the meantime. And there's always ways that you can try to do something. Obviously, the main event was not supposed to go 88 seconds, so they had a certain amount of time left on the air that night before, you know, the pay-per-view was to be over. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. I'm not saying I am at all envious of the position that this put the people who worked for the company in. But you cannot allow this guy to go out to the ring if you can visually see, oh shit, this guy is so fucked up. To let him walk through the curtain is absolutely ridiculous. There is no excuse for allowing that to happen. That is total amateur hour. There was no good scenario, I don't think, where the fans don't end up getting screwed somehow. But I think you could have stopped him from going out. Sent Bischoff out for a promo just like he did on his own. Send Bischoff out for a promo to stall until somebody who wrestled earlier in the night is able to be sent out there to challenge Sting to a match. Like, for example, an AJ Styles. You know, AJ had a match earlier on in the show, so he was there. But, you know, these guys are also athletes. I understand both sides of the coin. These guys are athletes, and you can't always send them out cold like that because that's how injuries happen. I think back to the Tyson Kidd thing in WWE, where he was supposed to have a match, the dark match, right, with Samoa Joe, and those guys didn't have any time to really warm up and stretch and prepare, and that was probably as much as anything to do with why he got hurt that night. So these guys are not machines that you can just push a button and program them and send them out there. They have to get ready. And if AJ already wrestled the match, maybe he hit the showers, who knows? But you cannot allow Jeff Hardy to go out there in that condition. Forgetting the fact that he's a danger to himself and a danger to his opponent, just him going out there like that is fucking embarrassing. You could have tried to call something on the fly. And I don't know if it would have worked. But you cannot allow that to happen. You cannot allow that guy, when you have the agent saying he is too messed up to go out there. How does nobody have the balls to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to take charge here? Is everybody just standing around waiting for somebody else to actually stand up and make a move? So Jeff ended up being sent home from the Impact tapings the following week, and he returned to the company later that year in September. But I'm glad he's doing better these days. Jeff now here in 2021 is seemingly in a better place. He's had other issues in recent years. Who's to say what the future is going to hold? But for the time being, it looks like Jeff has gotten himself to a good place, and that's good to see. And 1 year ago this week, the world changed. The world was shut down by a global pandemic that we are still in the middle of, that I don't think it's much of an exaggeration to say has changed all of our lives, even if only temporarily. It affected everybody. It affected everything. From how and where we work to entertainment and sporting events and everything in between. Pro wrestling was not spared. Pro wrestling is a business that is based entirely on live crowd reaction and audience participation, and all of a sudden it was thrust into this weird world of emptiness, of empty arena shows and no fans. In other cases, you had companies shut down completely until it was safe to reopen. WWE never did shut down. They were building towards a WrestleMania at Raymond James Stadium with Roman Reigns challenging Bill Goldberg for the Universal Championship, and The Undertaker wrestling AJ Styles, and John Cena wrestling The Fiend. And the pandemic completely upended all of those plans. And on March 13th, 2020, WWE ran its first live show from the Performance Center in Orlando with Michael Cole and Triple H on commentary. What a team they were. One of the weirdest shows that I have ever seen. It all just felt so unsettling in front of an audience of empty chairs. 1 year later, we still don't have fans back in the buildings for the WWE main roster shows. NXT has some fans every week, but we still have no fans back in the buildings for Raw and for SmackDown. But that's all about to change with WrestleMania. And I look forward to the day that we can put all of this behind us. And I know there are way more important things in the world than wrestling as far as COVID goes and how it's affected people's lives. But as a wrestling fan, we have lost a lot of great moments without the benefit of there being a live audience. And so I think to get that reaction back, to get the audience back, so when somebody comes back for a big return or there's a big debut, some of the interpromotional stuff that we've been seeing, for example, on AEW Dynamite, all these moments that in front of a live audience, a packed live audience, 5,000, 10,000 people would just be going nuts for. We've been, as fans, we've been deprived of, and the talent too. You gotta think the talent. When you have somebody who comes over and debuts in AEW and they come out to a mostly empty building, it's got to be jarring, and they're probably thinking, man, if only I would have done this 6 months ago or 12 months ago or whatever, I could have had a packed crowd and gotten a nice big reaction. So we've missed out on a lot of those moments. We need to have that back. Wrestling just isn't as fun without it. We need to have that back, and hopefully that'll become a reality very soon.